Hi Stampers, my name is Susan Petty-Baylor. I'm an independent Stampin' Up! Demonstrator in West Hartford, Connecticut, and today I wanted to show you a really fun technique that I just learned a couple of weeks ago. I'm going to call it alcohol ink on vellum cardstock. I don't think there's an official name for it, but the videos that I've seen, that's basically what it is. The original video that I saw where I learned this technique was from Jan Francis. She's a Stampin' Up! Demonstrator in UK, and I will link her video below, or I'm sorry, I will link to her video below my video, so you can go ahead and check out her video as well. The technique obviously requires vellum cardstock. I also use some alcohol blends markers. You can do a combination of 3 to 5 is pretty much what I did, although you could use as many as you want. But you need alcohol markers, 90% or higher alcohol. I'm told that it doesn't work well with 70% alcohol, which is what you typically see on the shelves at the drugstore. So I got 91%, and that's what I've been using. You need some sort of a paintbrush. I used an aqua painter. It's an old Stampin' Up! Aqua painter. We now have aqua brushes, which are just a tiny bit different. But it's essentially the same thing, just a slightly different configuration. And I always have alcohol in this particular aqua painter. It's something that I play with periodically. You want a paper towel, you want something to protect your work surface. I have a nonstick craft sheet from Ranger that I got quite a few years ago, and I just keep it on hand for any super messy projects like this. And again, the 8.5 by 11 vellum cardstock, just quartered, so it means you've got four pieces of 5.5 by 4.25. That way you can use one sheet for an entire card front, or you can cut it up. You can cut it using punches, you can use dies, cut it with a scissors. I've cut it diagonally with a paper trimmer. You can do all kinds of things with it. So we'll go over to my craft table and we'll get started on this alcohol on vellum. Okay, so I have several 5.5 by 4.25 inch pieces of vellum cardstock. I've chosen 3 blends marker colors, to use. I have the dark Night of Navy, the dark polished pink, and the dark Highland Heather. And you want to remember when you're using these markers, they have 2 different tips. The thin line on the barrel indicates the bullet tip, and the thick line on the barrel indicates the brush tip. And for this particular project, we're going to use the side of the brush tip. And here I'm just laying down random swatches of color, and eventually I'm going to cover this entire piece of vellum with the blends markers. Remember that the blends markers come in pairs. You get a light and a dark of each color, of the same color. So I used the dark shades of all the colors because when you add alcohol to the ink, the blends markers, it gets quite light, quite a bit lighter. You can see on my work surface that retired aqua painter that I mentioned. Normally it's got 70% alcohol in it, but for this particular project, again, 90% alcohol or higher is recommended. I have found I did switch the alcohol in that barrel to the 91%, and I found that it was messing with the diaphragm inside the aqua painter, and it made it really difficult to squeeze the alcohol through the aqua painter. So instead of using it like I would an aqua painter, I'm just going to use it like a paintbrush and dip the tip of the brush into the cap full of alcohol that you see there on my work surface. So I'm using the polished pink right now to fill in some of the remaining white spots. on my Vellum Card Stock. I did want to mention that Stampin' Up! Has come out with some new water painters as a replacement for the aqua painter. They have 3 different tips. You get 1 of each when you purchase these. There's a wide tip, which would be perfect for this particular project, a medium tip, and a fine tip. They're great for watercoloring. So I'm just going to set those aside and go ahead and use my older retired aqua painter and start putting some alcohol down on the vellum background. You want to have a tissue or a paper towel handy to blot up any excess alcohol that you might get on your project. Sometimes, especially when you're using the aqua painter and squeezing the barrel, it's much easier to get an excess of alcohol in the project. I find that by dipping the paintbrush into the alcohol, it's much easier actually to control. And you'll see me periodically wiping off the tip of my brush on the paper towel. That's because every once in a while I get the tip of it into the dark Night of Navy, and I don't want to get that into the Highland Heather or the polished pink and muddy up the color. I want to keep the color as pristine as I can, so that's why I wipe the excess ink off of my brush onto the paper towel. You'll notice that when the vellum gets wet, be it with alcohol or water, it wants to curl. You're going to start to see it curling up in the middle here as I'm putting the alcohol, more and more alcohol onto the vellum. And in this particular project, I want to keep the vellum flat. I don't want the ink to run uncontrollably. So I'm just going to use a retired paper piercing tool to hold my vellum down and to keep it from curling and the alcohol from running. You can let the alcohol dry on its own. I prefer using a heat tool to dry it for a couple different reasons. First of all, I'm impatient and I don't want to wait. It would probably take a good 10 minutes for the alcohol on the vellum to dry completely, but then it's all curled up and I want it to be flat. So by using the heat tool, not only does it dry the alcohol quickly, but it also flattens the vellum and you don't have it curling up on you. I have an older heat tool. If you have an older heat tool like me, there's only one speed. It's either off or on. And when it's on, it's a high speed, high heat. So I suggest, and you can see the alcohol ink drying in the darker colors there. I suggest holding the heat tool when it's on high, a good 12 inches above your vellum, so that it doesn't get too hot and so that it doesn't blow around the ink and the alcohol too much. The newer heat tools tend to have a high and low setting, so I would suggest using the low setting, and then you can get much closer to your project. It won't get super hot. After you've dried the alcohol ink on the vellum, you can see here I'm putting down a little bit more of the Highland Heather ink because it's very, very light. I decided I wanted a little bit darker, so I'm adding a little more color, and then I'm going to take my aqua painter and blend in the ink with a little bit of alcohol. So that's one of the fun things about this particular background is you can reactivate this ink at any time just by either spritzing the alcohol or using the alcohol brush. I mentioned the non-stick craft mat from Ranger that I'm working on. I really like it. It helps to keep my work surface clean, and I will link that information in the video description below the video, as well as other projects that I used. So I'm just drying this off really well, front and back, so that I make sure I don't get any ink where I'm not expecting it if it's, you know, wet on the back. And I'm just going to use that little bit of alcohol left over in the cap and my paper towel to clean up my work surface. In Jan Francis's video, she added some gold embossing powder and I believe also some gilding flakes to her projects. She used a quickie glue pen to put down some glue in very thin lines around some of those borders between colors, just to highlight them, as I'm showing you there. I did not have that quickie glue pen when I was doing my other backgrounds a few weeks ago, and I instead used my fine tip glue, and I also used my VersaMark marker to then, you know, put down some gold embossing powder. Here I'm showing you, this is a background made using Cherry Cobbler, Shaded Spruce, and Daffodil Delight, and I put down some gold embossing powder using the VersaMark pen, and then heating the embossing powder. I can tell because it's a little bit thicker line. The VersaMark does not have a very fine tip. On another project that you'll see shortly, I also used the fine tip glue pen and some gilded leafing to put down some alcohol. These two backgrounds I made using the same colors, Pool Party, Granny Apple Green, Mango Melody, and Magenta Madness, but you can see it depends on where you put the ink and how much alcohol you put on as to how your backgrounds will turn out. So the point being that you can do this with the same colors multiple different times and it will turn out different every time. I like to mount my finished vellum pieces on basic white. I think it really makes the colors pop, but you might want to try something different. Maybe you want to highlight the Mango Melody that's used in this background. So you could try mounting it on Mango Melody and you can see how that orangey color really pops. Or maybe try mounting it on Pool Party and you can see it really brightens up that blue. But personally, I like to mount my pieces on basic white, but again, that's personal preference and you can do whatever you like. When I do these backgrounds, I try to do swatches so that I remember what colors I've used, you know, a few weeks down the line when I'm putting the cards together or the pieces together in a particular card. So unfortunately here you can see that my phone has gone onto super slow motion. I apologize for this. I've recorded this video so many times, driving me crazy. Anyway, I made several cards using the background die from the Potted Succulents die set. This first card I used the background die, I cut it out from black, basic black, and I mounted it on the vellum background using Poppy Parade, Bermuda Bay, Granny Apple Green, and Mango Melody. And you can see where I let the ink run a bit when I was adding the alcohol. And here you can see that I'm showing you the background die from the potted succulents. I apologize for this extreme slow motion. I've tried to edit as much out as I possibly could, and we'll see how the rest of this goes. The second card I used the potted succulents die to cut from gold foil, and I mounted it on the background of Flirty Flamingo, Bermuda Bay, and Daffodil Delight. In the third card, I cut the background die from basic white cardstock and mounted it on a vellum piece made using Pool Party, Magenta Madness, Granny Apple Green, and Mango Melody. I think they all turned out really beautiful. They highlight the background as opposed to covering it up, but they're all very different. So you could try different colors using a die like that. Here I made the background of the flowers using Pale Papaya, Fresh Freesia, and Soft Succulent. I used the dies from Poppy Moments and painted labels, and I cut out the flowers as well as the detail pieces I cut out from basic white and from gold foil. I used some gilded leafing and the retired basic pattern decorative masks to add a little gold detail to the center of the card. The sentiment, the Happy Mother's Day sentiment, is from a retiring stamp set called A Wish for Everything. It's matted on soft succulent, and then the card base is pale papaya. I don't know if you can hear the Halloween noises in the background. This is crazy. So here's a background that I made using Magenta Madness, Granny Apple Green, and Mango Melody. They're bigger blotches of color than some of the other ones that I've done. I took the 5.5 by 4 1/4 piece, cut it down to 5 1/4 by 4 inches, and then I used my paper trimmer to cut the vellum diagonally, giving me 2 card front pieces. The bottom pieces are Magenta Madness, and they are embossed with the Painted Texture embossing folder. The card on the right, I used a retired Happy Birthday framelit and cut that from several layers of basic white cardstock and sponged it with Granny Apple Green. I wanted a little bit softer shade of the Granny Apple Green. But that's a stack of, I think, about 4 pieces of cardstock just to give it some dimension. And then I did the same thing with the Just Wanted to Say on the left, cut from the Floral Gallery dies. 1 layer is cut from gold foil, and 3 more layers cut from basic white and stacked for dimension. On this next set of cards, the background is Magenta Madness, Granny Apple Green, and Mango Melody. I used my layering circle dies to cut large circles from the vellum. I stamped the flowers using the Pretty Perennials stamp set and cut them out using the Perennial Petals dies. The leaves are cut from Granny Apple Green. The basic white cardstock is texture embossed with the Tasteful Textures embossing folder, and I used some in-color enamel dots. These backgrounds I made using Night of Navy, Highland Heather, and Polished Pink. I took the 5.5 by 4 1/4 piece and cut it in half. So then I had 2 pieces of 5.5 by 2 1/8 and then 2 card fronts. The left I cut 3 flowers from the Dandy Wishes die set from white and mounted it, and on the right I used the same die and cut 3 pieces from basic black cardstock. The sentiments are stamped from the Peaceful Moments stamp set. And I thought the one on the right with the black made a really striking sympathy card, which I unfortunately needed at the time. This is a card that my sister made. I got to visit her a couple of weeks ago in Pennsylvania after not seeing her for well over a year. I was so excited about this new technique, and I just knew that she would like it. So she made a whole bunch of different backgrounds. She had a good time making lots of different backgrounds using lots of different colors. And she made this background and made it into a card and sent it to me, and I just love it. I'm not positive about the colors. I'm sure she told me, but I don't remember. I believe Highland Heather, Mint Macaron, Daffodil Delight, and there's some pink in there, maybe some polished pink, and then the silver dragonfly backed with Mint Macaron. These are all the cards that I made. I hope you enjoyed this video despite my technical difficulties. If you like this video, I would really appreciate if you would give it a thumbs up. If this is your first time visiting my channel, please click to subscribe and then click on the bell icon to be notified when I upload a video in the future. So until next time, happy stamping.